Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
We're here at GDC 2018, and if you didn't realize it, we're here in the Oculus booth because it's our first time getting hands-on with the upcoming Oculus Go.
It's go time.
Yeah, I guess it is. We got to spend some time with this device on a variety of games we're demoing here on the floor. Still no idea of when it's actually going to come out, but as a quick recap, this is their standalone headset with 3 degrees of freedom tracking, much like the Gear VR system, but it's going to be $200.
Right, so that means rotational head tracking only, so you're looking in every direction, but if you try to move your head in any direction, it's not going to be tracked. But it does have one controller, which is also not positionally tracked, also has the same style of rotational tracking.
We'll talk about like the tracking, the way the software gets around only 3 degrees of tracking a little bit, but let's talk about like the experience, the hardware.
Yeah.
You know, the visual fidelity, Oculus says it uses a very high density display. It's an LCD panel that's high resolution that you get on Gear VR or the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, I think that the optics are probably the most impressive thing to me out of the gate.
Yes.
I found not only the field of view to be slightly larger than I'm used to on the Rift or any of the other headsets, but more importantly, the field of focus, like the sweet spot in the center of the lens, appears to be bigger. In fact,
Much bigger.
Considerably bigger.
Yeah, you don't really get any of the lens fringing effects until you get to this tiny sliver around the edge of the display.
And they did say that they have completely revamped the optics, that they've taken everything that they've learned, and these are the next generation optics.
In fact, we want these optics on the Rift if possible.
I said, yeah, obviously with the Rift optics being removable, I think people, once they use this, they're going to demand that.
I think they're still Fresnel lenses. If you look at the lenses, you can see the concentric rings, but you get none of that linen effect that's very typical of the Rift. Or any of the God rays effects.
Right. I don't know if you don't get any, but they claim that they are greatly reduced.
One thing that is different though is that this, like Gear VR, is a single panel in here.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Rift or the Vive where you have 2 panels. And for me, what that meant was that if I push this against my face, I could see some of the edge of the screen.
I saw that too.
Right.
You know, maybe that's
On
one
the
of
peripheral.
that's one of the cons of having a wider field of view, is you actually have to see that extremity.
This facial interface, also very comfortable. It's not removable. It's some type of soft foam, and while we use these for about 10 minutes at a time, they weren't absorbent for sweat.
Well, it's also a very light device. Like it's let me see this. I mean, it's lighter than a Gear VR, I would say, and it's certainly lighter than like a Daydream. I think that the weight of this matters a lot to how hard that facial interface has to press against your head, because you don't necessarily have to have the straps tightened back as hard as they could possibly go.
Yeah, they also designed the strap so the top strap is removable as well if you just want to use a side strap. And the way this is split off in the back, almost like in the Rift, where you want to cup it in the back of your head, made it pretty comfortable.
They said this part was removable, right?
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes, absolutely. You have on the inside there is a proximity sensor, so it knows when to activate.
There's a microphone underneath, at least what looks to be a microphone hole.
Yep, microphone hold there. You have power as well as your volume controls, and on the side you have 2 ports. These are the only hardware input-output ports, which is micro USB and audio jack.
So it has built-in speakers. Though you can't see, there's nothing that moves, there's nothing that you add to create the speakers. They're just in there, and they get pushed back along this channel somehow and reflected into your ears. It's not terribly loud. Now, this is a very loud environment. I had to put it on maximum, and I still wanted a little bit more. Plus, it's not completely isolated. Like if you're on a bus or something like that, I have a feeling that other people around you will be able to hear a little bit of that sound.
Yeah,
so
I wasn't able to cup it either, block out the sound.
Yeah.
I was putting my hands around the side of the headset, and I could still hear that sound.
Oh, interesting, right.
You'll probably want to use your own earbuds, your own headphones. When you plug those into the 3.5mm jack, it turns off the speakers automatically. But data and power are interesting things. So there's of course a battery in here. We don't know how long it's going to run for. Developers have said it's longer than they have expected. But there's also data through this USB jack. Whether that's for firmware updates or for your own media, we're not sure. The Oculus developers have told us that you will be able to put your own media, video files, or maybe even music on this device. Whether it's over Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or the wired connection, they just haven't told us yet.
Right. Now, we did accidentally go back into the menus of the Go to see the native, system menus, and it looks like home. It basically is a curved system of panels that you can interact with by rotating this and going left and right and choosing from there. There's no home environment that I saw. However, it sounds to me like that's something that's on their radar that they would like to work on eventually.
So in the menu system, which I also accidentally backed out into, It was like a wallpaper, and then like Core 2.0, there was a menu system on the
Home,
bottom.
right? Yeah.
Home,
Oh, yeah.
yes. Where you can't lean into it or position it, but you had battery indicators on the right. There was also brightness settings. Looked like there was going to be some type of social, some type of sharing.
You said your brightness was really low.
Yeah, and all the devices I used, brightness was like at 20%.
Probably battery conservative.
Right. It was something that was concerning me because when looking at the panel, this LCD panel, I was worried that it wasn't going to be as bright or as high contrast as like the OLED panels we have on the desktop headsets. But it is when I turn off that brightness, it looked great. And something that Oculus has said is by using an LCD panel with a high pixel fill factor and this high resolution and their new optics, the screen door effect is greatly reduced. And I think it's true. Like you don't see grid lines. You see maybe little dots between the pixels, but the pixels still aren't small enough that you can't tell that there are jaggies there.
Which is especially good considering how clear the screen is. You would expect to see it even better than you could otherwise.
Yeah.
So one thing that they now announced yesterday about the screen itself is that they're allowing developers to render at either a 60 hertz or 72 hertz frame rate. Now, 72 is kind of interesting because we're used to 90 from the Rift and the other desktop headsets. 72, though, is a multiple of 24.
Ah, yes.
So it would
video.
make a lot of sense to render video at that frame rate. Now, we played a couple of games here today, I think 3 games on Go, and on one of them, on Catan, I noticed a bit of flicker in a very bright environment, and it turns out that was running at 60. So it is going to be something that I noticed. However, Norm did not notice it, so it might be your own personal taste about what you would prefer, 60 or 72. There is a performance hit at 72, but you get those extra frames.
And speaking of performance, it's not using the latest and greatest system on a chip that you would find on like a Samsung smartphone, right? So if you use the Gear VR on a latest smartphone, you would think that better SoC might give you better performance. But what Oculus is telling us is because they control the hardware here end to end, and they're building their own version of Android to run this software, they don't have a lot of the filler that you would have on a smartphone. And because they control the design of where the chip is and where the passive cooling is relative to the display and the chip, they can actually optimize that performance on that hardware to actually get you that 72 frames per second.
And one other optimization that they've made is this new foveated rendering. It's a term we've heard for a long time associated with eye tracking. Of course, there's no eye tracking on the Go, but so what they've done is they've simply done foveated rendering on the center, where you're getting all of that crisp clarity. And they're giving the developers the option of rendering the extremities at a lower resolution. Now that's something that maybe doesn't matter as much on the Rift, where you have all the horsepower in the world on a NVIDIA graphics card. But when on a portable device like this, where you're really concerned with every little bit of performance, that's going to be a huge benefit, I would think.
Yeah, so from our experience, just using it, the visual fidelity looked great. I mean, I think you could tell that they were Gear games. They definitely weren't as high poly or high res textures as we were used to on the Rift side. But something that was interesting was one of the games actually is now available is Catan, and that is cross-platform.
Right, Rift and Go.
And we both played it wearing the Go using the one controller, while the 2 other players were using Rift, and it was really interesting to see that those players were able to lean into the board and have 2 hands. I felt very limited.
Oh, I think coming from a Rift perspective, you're going to be moving your head all the time the first day you get this. And
that's not good.
It's going to be jarring because you're not moving in the game.
The whole environment moves with you,
right, exactly.
laterally.
We experienced that on DK1. Anyone that ever used Gear VR is used to that, daydreams like that. It's just... It's if you're coming from the high end, it's going to be something you have to acclimate to. If you've never tried VR before, you're going to be fine with it.
And that's why this, I think, is more of a lean back experience. You want your back on the edge of your seat or your couch and just rotating your head. Now, the controller is also representing your hand in the game. And in Catan, it was one hand, you could choose left or right. And I thought it was interesting, it's more laser pointer style.
Right, there's no point in moving your hand like this. It's all rotational.
All rotation, and you get a laser pointer, and you can't calibrate the position of this relative to the headset. That's locked in for the developer.
Right. In Catan and maybe another game, you calibrated center by holding down the Oculus button, right?
And that locks your visual center.
Right.
But the controller center, where this is, it's always fixed in that one point.
Relative to
the headset.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I would have liked for you to be able to maneuver that around and position it. Because maybe my hand's going to be on my lap, or maybe it's going to be on an armrest, and not necessarily holding out right here.
I could see that being a software problem. If developers wanted to do that for a particular use case in the game, certainly they could find a way to do that.
Now you also don't get hand gestures mapped one-to-one with your hand as well.
Right.
They try to emulate hand presence by having shortcuts. In a Catan, for example, you would press the different directional buttons on the touchpad to make a thumbs up or a peace sign, and then you can rotate that.
Yeah.
But they don't have capacitive sensors on the trigger here,
No.
so you can point by releasing your finger and actually do a point.
Right, so another example of how the Rift were a little more capable because they had many different gestures that they could do, but to be expected.
And this is connected to the Go with Bluetooth, so you can also pair, for example, a gamepad with it, but they didn't confirm whether you can pair something like a keyboard. It sounds like that's probably not going to be the case, or even Bluetooth headphones,
Right.
for which they said that's maybe a latency issue, but that's not something they're locking down right now before their launch.
Right, they're basically looking at Gear VR parity.
Something that they didn't consider, it sounded like I asked them about, is why can't you have two of these controllers and get me two virtual hands and give me two laser pointers, because then at least you would be able to have better presence by 3 points.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably technically possible, but again, Gear VR parity wouldn't allow for that.
But again, if you're talking about a cross-platform game like Catan,
Yeah.
where I see Rift users
Right.
having two hands, I felt like I was crippled. I only had got one hand. Like, I wanted even just to have my second hand there.
Norman, you've been given a $200 VR
know.
headset, and yet you are dissatisfied and you want more control.
Yeah. Well, who knows, right? $200 I think is, for what we've seen so far,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing for the visual fidelity. It's in many ways already looking better than what we've seen on the Rift, which is a 2-year-old product.
Right, no, visually it's really, really impressive, and I think everyone who puts this on, no matter where you're coming from in VR, is going to be very surprised.
So the big questions are right now going to be battery life, performance over a long period of time, that launch content, which we're only seeing a little bit of here, and also how much of your own content, how much of your own media can you actually put on this device, or is it going to be locked in that walled garden?
Right, and how much storage will there be? Will there only be that 32 gigabyte SKU that we saw posted online? We don't know.
Right. All of those questions hopefully answered in the near future, maybe even at Facebook's own FA conference happening in May. But I think so far I've been pretty happy with what I've used so far.
Oh, yeah.
And I really can't wait to take this home and use it in association, in conjunction with the Rift, not to
Right.
replace the Rift, but as another VR device at home. So while we're here at GDC, we got a chance to play a ton of VR games, some of which are on the distant horizon and some of which are coming to early access. And we'll have impressions on those games in future episodes, but for this episode, we want to chat about one game.
One game we've been waiting maybe the longest for.
Yes.
Is that's fair, right?
Yeah. Yes. Very highly anticipated Budget Cuts from Neat Corporation is coming out, and they have a release date, May 16th.
It's right around the corner.
Yeah.
So we've been waiting for this ever since the Vive. This was the killer app for the Vive as far as I was concerned when we tried all the first demos. In fact, there's a video of me online of me trying to put my head through the floor, and when we went to see this demo, the developer said, "Oh, you're the guy who put his head through the floor." Right?
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of opportunities to put our heads through the floor in this game, which they say is about 7 hours of content.
Yeah.
But I chatted with developers while we both play. Let's go jump to that interview and then share some impressions.
The game has come a long way since the demo back in, 2016, I think? It's been a while, but we've been focusing on making sure that everything is really built solidly. Everything was super hacked together for the demo, you just have to get it out there. So we focused a lot on the AI systems. You got to test out some of the combat. You did really well there, actually. That was impressive. And we've been making sure that we add a lot of depth to the world. So as you saw, it's not just enemy robots anymore. We also have friendly worker robots, and we have a few other archetypes that you'll discover throughout the game.
When that demo was first released, you guys first released it 2 years ago, how much of a game did you already have in the design plan, or was it just an experimentation in that teleportation movement in that world?
Well, I think the thing that really caught everyone's eye with that was the teleportation, right? And that's the same thing for the developers and us. We really just knew that the teleportation was fun, throwing knives was fun. So we wanted to focus on that. At the point of releasing the demo, that's all we had. We just had the demo, and it was really hacked together. So we had to go back to the drawing board, make sure everything worked for a solid game, 7 hours of gameplay now. So we needed to make sure that everything that we had built would work for a solid big game.
Yeah, the demo was a lot of stealth, sneaking around, looking around corners. You actually felt very vulnerable as a character. I didn't want to engage with the robots because it would be very tense. Is that the feeling that we're supposed to get for the full game? How does the gameplay break down?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it is a stealth game. You can approach it however you like. If you're the type of player that likes to sneak around and be a little bit more like strategy and find all the pickups and stuff, you can do that. If you like to go Rambo style and just throw knives, you can do that as well. But there's always a route to take around, so keep an eye out for those vents.
You guys have been pretty radio silent since the release of the demo, just working on the game.
Yep.
Can we expect any surprises in terms of mechanics? Anything you guys have learned in the making of the game that you can't wait for people to check out?
Yeah, well, I mean, all of you who have played the demo will definitely recognize that type of gameplay in the game, but we do have a few aces up our sleeves in the later levels, so we don't want to tell you too much about it, but there is some surprises. For sure.
In terms of the level design, now getting around the world in the demo was interesting because you couldn't just go through doors, right? You had to look through holes in the walls, climb through tunnels, and sometimes you'd be on top of an area and teleporting down. What have you done with level design in terms of making the most out of that teleportation mechanic?
Well, yeah, like you say, we really want to try to make the player feel like they are stealthy. They are in a position that, you know, you can get around places that you normally wouldn't as a human being, right, with this teleportation translocation device. So we definitely try to capitalize on that, not just in this level, but in later levels as well, with a lot of height variety and a lot of spaces that you would normally see in a place, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to get to as a normal human being. So with the translocator, it definitely makes that possible. And I think VR really makes it feel like you are being quite sneaky and getting up onto these high platforms and different places.
Now you're demoing this at the Valve booth, and Budget Cuts was one of the first Steam VR room scale style games. You guys are also launching on the Oculus platform. Did you have to design with any constraints in mind in terms of how many tracking cameras people would have and how much they'd be able to move in their space?
It definitely was something that we had in mind. We are going to support front-facing, but we definitely encourage everyone to set up a 3-point camera or even 2-point for room scale on Oculus, because it just gives a much more immersive experience, we think, especially with the stealth gameplay, being able to duck, being able to move around in a space. We definitely encourage that. Again, not everyone has that. They sometimes have front-facing with their computer, and that's fine. We're going to support that too.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to play the full game. It's just, like a month or half or so away from now. And it's very nice to see you here at GDC. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Jeremy, what did you think?
Well, I'm continuing to be excited about this game. Now, I didn't know what they were going to do. Like, they could have taken the budget cuts that we saw originally and just used the same textures and the same architecture and just made a bigger building, and I would have been happy. But it looks like they've done more work than that. Like, there are robots in the world beyond the aggressive ones, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like
they put the whole story. Right. It's a still stealth game,
Yeah.
but you are infiltrating this office building that are filled with different types of robots, NPCs, and you have to evade some of them in certain ways and evade some of them in other ways.
And some aren't aggressive. Like,
That's right.
there's a Roomba. I have to believe there's something more to the Roomba than just crawling around being cute.
I like that they took the two mechanics they knew people would love from the demo. The teleportation mechanic, which is more of a portal-based one. You throw the ball and you can look around, peer around corners before you then move through it.
Right.
And also throwing knives, throwing scissors.
Yeah, that was the core gameplay that they said everyone loved the throwing knives, and so they're sticking with it. As far as we can tell, there's no guns, there's no other weapons. There are other things to throw. We found some scissors, found some darts. In fact, in the demo, there's that dart gun, right? There's like a crossbow. That we didn't see anything like that here. Maybe that's in there, maybe it's not.
Now, most of the moving around that world was very similar to what we had in the demo. Opening grates and then going through grates, as opposed to going straight through the door, going into the ceiling.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what other ways to move around the office can I think of.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I was glad to see that they're doing more of the going through the rafters, because that was one of my favorite parts. In the original demo, they do this teleportation thing where you throw your ball, your teleportation ball, and then wherever it lands, if you can't teleport there, it will give you an indication you have to duck, right? And then if you do duck, then you can teleport. And there's a lot more of that in even the small part of the game that we were able to play here in 15 minutes.
And this is a game that will be released both on Steam VR and also for the Oculus Rift.
Yeah.
So they're recommending that you have a 3-camera setup if you have the Rift, but the game will also work if you just have the standing 2-camera setup.
Yeah, it is a teleportation game, so it doesn't necessarily need room scale, but there's going to be a lot of vertical movement.
Yeah, well, the game comes out May 16th. We're very excited. I think everything we played of it here just reaffirms that the game is on track, and and we can't wait to play it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to play this one. I mean, and I'm glad to hear that it's not just a Vive exclusive, which was what we maybe thought when they went to work at Valve for a moment. They were there for about a month. I think Valve offered them some space if they wanted to stay on, but nope, they want to return home to Stockholm, where they've been working on the game ever since. So it's coming out soon, and I'm excited.
Yep, and one last thing, in our previous impressions of the Go, one thing I forgot to mention was that it fit over my glasses, but I still preferred to not use my glasses. Even though there's no focus adjustment, with my glasses, I felt like it was just going to fog up a little bit too much.
How does the clearance for your glasses compare to, say, the Rift?
It did not push into the lenses, which I thought was good.
Like the Rift does?
It can.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. So there you have it. We'll have more from our playtest at GDC in future episodes. Like this video, and we'll see you next time.